Welcome to the Original Rushman Show, where we will be taking a historical look into the mystical, magical, musical world of Rush, highlighting the career of Rush as seen through the eyes of an original Rush fan. So join me on this journey by subscribing below, and maybe you will discover the Rush that I know. All right, thank you for joining me for this episode of the Original Rushman Show. I had just discovered the greatest music I'd ever heard in my life. Music that affected me in a way that no other music had ever affected me. And I could hardly sleep that night in anticipation of getting up the next morning and going to the record store and buying this album. It's the only thing that's on my mind. And so you can imagine my disappointment when I arrived at the record store and went straight to the R's, and of course we saw the Rolling Stones, probably a little Linda Ronstadt and Rufus, who knows what all was in there, but there was no Rush. And so I went up to the counter and asked the man behind the counter if he sold any albums by a band called Rush. And he very abruptly and rudely said, "Never heard of them." And so I'm like going, "Never heard of them? Isn't this your business? You know this?" And so I had to ride my bicycle all the way home, so disappointed, with no ability to listen to this new album that I desperately wanted to listen to. I was expecting to bring that album home, open it up, look at it, read it, put it on the turntable and listen to it all day long. And now I have to go home with nothing and no way of playing this music that is recorded on an 8-track tape. So I decided to call every store in Midland, Texas that could possibly remotely sell records and ask them if they had anything by Rush. And believe it or not a single record store had a copy of a Rush album. I was beside myself. I didn't know what to do. I had to sit there and wait for hours for my mother to come home in my Mustang so that I could get the keys and put this 8-track tape into the stereo system inside that car and listen to it. And it was a long, long afternoon. And Neil Peart was pounding drums into her head, and it like to scared her to death. Now, my mother, when it comes to music, Elvis Presley is about as hard a rock as she could handle. And so this was quite a shock to her system. And that nearly ended it, but I promised that would never happen again. And this had to satisfy me for another couple of weeks after that, when an old friend of mine from Monahans, Texas, called me and said he'd just moved to Midland and wanted to know if I wanted to hang out. Believe it or not, he just gave me his address, and I knew where his house was, and I got on my bicycle and I rode to his house. And I walked into his house, and in his fancy living room, there were 4 speakers, one in each corner of the room. The very top of the room, you couldn't see any wires coming down or anything, just speakers up there. And I said, "Wow, do you like music?" And he went, "Oh yeah, I love music." And I said, "Have you ever heard of a band called Rush?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got all 4 of their albums." I said, "What you talking about, Mark?" "Yeah, I got all 4 of their albums." I said, "Well, I hope you don't mind listening to Rush all afternoon." And I told him the 8-track tape story, and he goes and pulls out all the first 4 albums, and I sit down there in the living room floor, and the first thing I do is I go to 2112, and I open it up, and I was just mesmerized, and then I flipped it over, and I saw the backside, and there's the Angels that I thought was playing on this 8-track tape. There they were in all their glory, in their white silk kimonos, and to me, I thought they were just the coolest dudes in the world. I turned and I looked to Mark and I said, "There's only 3 of them?" And he goes, "Yeah, there's only 3 of them." And now my desire to know more about this band is just exploding, because how can 3 people make all that music? I didn't understand it, but I said, well, the first thing we're going to do is listen to their first album, because I wanted to know how they went from wherever they started to that greatness. I couldn't imagine how that all happened. So we listened to the first album, then the second album, then the third album, then 2112. And we had so much fun. Mark knew what was coming up, so he goes, "Oh, check this out, watch this." And then Neil Peart would do a cascading drum fill or something like that, and we would fall back onto the couch, feigning disbelief, and just had the best time ever. So now I know, and there wasn't a bad song on any of the albums, and I just couldn't believe it. I've never ran across a band that could not write a bad song. So now there's not just one album that I need. I need 4 albums, and nobody sells it. And I'm like, "Mark, where did you get these albums?" And in a little bitty old town called Monahans, Texas, population 8,333, some dude had a shop where he was selling imports from England and off the wall type rock and roll and other type music. And I'm not going, well, that's just not fair. I live in a bigger city. I should have more access. So now I've got to find 4 albums. And I don't know where I'm going to find it. All I have is a bicycle. And I'm just going insane. And fast forward about a month from there was this new thing being built in Odessa, Texas. It was called a mall. And that thing was opening up. And, everybody went to it. And so we had to go to it. And we walk in, and I see this big old Hastings record store, and I'm like getting all excited, and I run into the Hastings stores, and I go to the R, and nothing, just a bunch of Rush sitting there. And so I'm like, okay, the first one is Fly By Night, Caress of Steel, 2112. There's a live album. Oh God, I gotta have the live album too. And so I get all 5 of these albums, and I take it to my mother, and I said, "Can I have all 5 of these?" No, you cannot have all 5 of those. Pick one. Of course, I took 2112 and had to be satisfied with that. But the desire to get all of Rush's albums is just filling my whole life at this point in time. And it wasn't much after that, in 1977, when A Farewell to Kings came out. So now there's 5 albums that I've got to get. So my quest is to get all their albums and find out as much about this band as I possibly can. But she finally came home, and I was able to listen to the album several more times before I had to go to bed. And this went on for weeks, 2-3 weeks. And I tried to find something during the day to keep me busy, and I'd listen to Rush at night. And this went on until one day I got distracted and forgot to eject the 8-track tape. Now, I listen to music pretty loud, real loud. And so when my mother at 6 o'clock in the morning is going out to get into the car to go to work, and she turns it on, Geddy Lee was screaming at her. Alex Lifeson was screaming at her. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Original Rushman Show. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.